Welcome back to Naval Action and episode 50 of A Letter to the King. If you're new to the series, you're 49 episodes behind, but don't worry, you can jump straight in. This is simply my attempt to give you a bit of a rundown of what's been going on PvP-wise on Euro PvP 1. 50 episodes. So let's see where we were. The alliances, the Western Alliance and the Eastern Alliance, are set in stone. I can't see them changing, and I don't know, until maybe a wipe or something comes along. And this week's biffo has been the busiest biffo I can recall, maybe even since we used to pull flags. Fundamentally, everybody has kicked the pants out of everybody, and really, other than one nation, nobody managed to take ports. Only the Americans managed to take ports this week, and we'll go through what is close to 30 port battles. And I have to tip my hat to, in fact, one of the American captains who keeps a little journal of the various biffs going on, and he sent me an updated copy of it yesterday, so that helped me fill in the blanks. I take notes each week on port battles and who's been fighting who, and I try and watch all the videos and catch up and, you know, ask people, different captains from different nations, let me know what went on in particular battles. I have to say there's a few blanks because there was half a dozen battles this morning, and other than the two I could watch in meetings at work on a phone under my desk. I am missing a couple towards the end of the week, so big tip of the hat to the folks who send me some gubbins. Feel free, as you normally do, to chuck in the comments about any of the more recent battles, or I have to say, with nearly 30 battles, I will miss some of the action here and probably stuff a bit up. A feast, a veritable feast awaits you. And the appetizers begin with the Swedes having a cheeky go at Orinoco. This would be repeated a couple of times during the week. And in the first battle, to be honest, it really came down to screening. Only half of them got in and pretty much gave up the ghost, as one would when only you get half your timber in. So the Swedes were repelled without much to do, to be honest. If you only get a dozen into a port battle, other than going on a Lalida, YOLO, Leroy Jenkins style thing, you may as well run. The next was a shallow water battle. This was a combination. It was probably actually more Americans than Brits. At Andros in the shallow water ports against predominantly a Spanish fleet. This was good fun. It's one of the videos that's up in the national chat. I linked the link to that. You just get on the forums and go into national chat and look for great fights and PvP. And page 25 and onwards covers this week. This was a great. They're just like little dodgem cars running around these shallow port battles. I must admit, I've fought in a couple, and having played mostly in the first rate and fourth rate battles, it does take a bit getting used to these again, because the boats are bobbing around left, right and centre. Your shots are going over your target, and quite often you've got to remember to, because the ships move so quick, you have to actually not quite lead but almost lead your target with your shots. And if you have it on like back rolling fire by accident, it can be a calamity in a shallow water battle, because the bugger's gone before your full volley's off. The Dutch had another go at Caracas, and this was defended by the French. I don't have a great deal of information on that. And that was really the appetizers for the week. And then we come to the first course. Now, this was a coordinated strike by the Western Alliance on the Eastern Alliance, lining up Port-au-Prince, Les Cayes, Puerto Plata, La Vega, and Santo Domingo, all in about a 4-hour time zone. And all these ports were hit by the Western Alliance, like I say, all within about 2 different sort of slots. Thank you. And the defenders really generally got the upper hand in this. At Port-au-Prince, where the US had a go at the Swedes. The US line got split, and this really got into a bit of a snowball when it started going wrong for the US flag. This was a US flag, but it was all of these battles. I'm just showing who raised the flag here. All of them were a combination defence with predominance in some of them. But the line got split. The Swedes got stuck into them and fundamentally tore them a new one. And in the end, I think the Allied forces perhaps lost 16 ships to only 2 ships lost by the defending forces. At Les Cays, this was actually an interesting one because this was actually a full French fleet. The Brits entered and really they probably didn't enter in the ideal area. And were too far away from any of the ports, and by the time they did get through, and I think a lot of them were held up in the screens, I think the battle was over in 21 minutes. So basically the French snaffled up all 3 circles, and by the time the Brits got their full fleet in, it was pretty much all over Red Rover. At La Vega, this was the US and the Danes. We'll come back to that one actually because that was the win. At Santo Domingo, this was the Brits and the Danes, and this was actually a really good fight. It was technically a really good fight. I might look at doing this one in one of the port battle tactics. It was technically a really good fight. It actually ended up 3 ships all, and no decisive winner from the battle. And it was a lot of it was fought along the coast. And it's probably one of the best first-rate defences tactically I've seen. Both captains who led their fleets did it very well. And in the Dutch against the Danes in Ponce, I believe it was a full fleet got in, but it was a strong defence. The win came to the US up here in La Vega. And it was an 8-2 win. They basically sank 8 enemy ships. Now, this is a great one to watch on the video. One of the things the Americans are probably the most authoritarian run fleet. Their commander really does, I wouldn't say micromanage, but he really manages the details of the battle. He spends like 80% of the battle in the map, to be honest. Which is what some commanders need to do. And the Americans did something that I really like to see, and that is they formed up 4 lines, not 2 lines, but 4 lines, and at one stage they almost had 5 lines. And to some extent they operated in fingers, they operated in groups of 4 or 5 ships, and they very much ran the engagement from start to finish. They managed to drag the enemy around the map, and they won the circles. I mean, they also sank 8 ships, which is the best part of 200 or 300 points delta that you pick up from that. So that ended up being a good win to the Americans. But the Eastern Alliance defended pretty much everything else stoutly, it has to be said. Now for the seafood surprise. Islamorada was held for a whole week by the Spanish last week. Well, that wasn't to last. In came the Americans to Islamorada, and this was a bit like the win they had here. It was a tactical win. It was probably seven ships to 6 or something in that order in favour of the Americans. But again, it was another one of these things where they won the circles. So where they picked fights and split their fleet, they made sure that the fights that mattered, they had the numbers. And they kept sniping circles off the Spanish. And I think they won it with about 20 minutes to go, but it was a good win for the Americans. And Islamorada has changed hands for perhaps the 12th time. The Swedes came back to Orinoco, and why wouldn't you? And in this particular case, this was just a good defence by the Brits. Not the best win for the Swedes going in, but I think in the end it was about an 8-ship kill to 1 ship against the Swedes. And again, this is the flag of the nations involved. The ships in here were a mishmash of different nations. And this was a good defence. There were some funny scenes in this one with half a dozen ships all pressed up against the shore and the likes. but it ended up a good and comfortable defence for the Brits. The Spanish then came at the pirates around, I think this is Nuevatus, this region is called Nuevatus. I don't have much detail about this other than the fact that the pirates held and the Spanish were defeated. The French then had to defend another attack from the Dutch around Pampatar, and this was a bit of a slaughter, it has to be said. I think it ended up 18 Dutch ships were sunk at Pampatar to the French losses that was only 3 losses. So this was all a bit of a bring your daughter to the slaughter as far as that's concerned. And I think, yeah, that might be it. Oh no, sorry, more in the seafood surprise. The Brits then had a bit of a laugh. They had a go at Basse-Terre and at the same time Bridgetown. Now they managed to get a full fleet into Basse-Terre. And I think this was one of the Brit clans for the first time fielding the best part of this fleet. They might have had 18 or 19 of the 25 ships in there, so well done, guys, for getting such a big lump of players. It's good to see another clan being able to bear arms. However, it wasn't the greatest day, and they sort of made the mistake, if you recall the video I did earlier on the week where we were talking about why the Brits use predominantly Vics, and it's for the speed and the ability to take the manoeuvrability down of the enemy. Well, unfortunately, that was forgotten a bit in this battle. And the Brits mixed it up too much in the Vics and sort of got outgunned by the Santis and the Oceans on the enemy fleet. And the brawl, although it didn't cost the Brits a lot of ships at the start of the battle, it was one of these things that the damage done to the Brits in the early part of the battle, they never really recovered from the amount of ships that were left, one or two broadsides away from taking a slap. So that was at Basse-Terre, to the north of the French capital. To the south of the French capital, the Brits had a go at getting Castries back. This was their first response after losing Castries, and they just met layer after layer after layer of screen, and simply couldn't land their first-rate fleet into the port. There was a lot of ships sunk in some of the screening fun, but nonetheless the port was left unharmed. The Americans then entertained the Spanish at Remedios and repelled their attack there. So they cling on to Remedios, and they've eaten now, the Americans, they've eaten deep into long time held Spanish territory. This is right next to their capital, so that's a bit of hard yakka. Now I actually think this was the Danes, not the Swedes, who loaded this flag. Now I'm seeing it appear on the screen. But they had a go again at the pirates across the north side of Haiti at Cap Francis, and the pirates staved the Danes off there. And then we come to the main course, where once again the Brits had a crack at oh my goodness me, I forgot its name, Les Cays. This was this morning. I'm not quite sure exactly what happened in this battle other than the French held it. I did watch this one on my stream, and this was the Swedes holding off what was an American flag against them at Port-au-Prince. And this was a pretty good battle, I have to say. There was a couple of rather ineffectual fire ships who were on fire for far, far too long, and then by the time they blew up, they just basically killed a bunch of fish and their own crew. And although it was a good fight and both sides swapped control of the circles, in the end the Swedes were they probably never felt like they were going to lose it. There were times where they were definitely under pressure, but they probably never felt like they were going to lose it, and they came out of that battle on balance and ahead. There was then a flag again by the US against the Danes, and I think this flag never got played. I think this was later, so this was like 2 a.m. by the time this kicked off. A lot of these battles were running at 11 o'clock and 12 o'clock, which is my morning today, and late on a Sunday in Europe. I think this one was either hashtag fake news, or I just think everyone was exhausted after all the previous biffo that had taken place. The Brits defended the Windward Islands from the French, and I think this was a bit of a slapping that the French took. I think the Brits pretty much ate this fleet alive. I haven't seen the video for this one, but someone did tell me it was a massacre, but I haven't confirmed that or seen the screenshots yet. But by all accounts, this was a easy defence. I haven't got news on the next shot, and I don't know how many times the Dutch have had a go at recovering Caracas, but this has got to be getting a bit expensive now for the old cloggies. But they couldn't get into Caracas again. The Brits had a go at Santo Domingo against a Danish defence. I don't have news on that, I'm afraid. This all happened this morning, and no one's really posted news. What I have news on, though, is two fights. One I'm going to spend a little moment talking about, and one I just know the outcome of. So the Frenchies came at Pedro K late on what would be Saturday night. And this was an interesting one because the Brits, and obviously you know the attack's coming, you got 2 days warning, and the Brits amongst themselves decided that this would be a real chance for a lot of the captains who spend most of the time pottering around KPR and getting picked on by sort of pirate type people, not pirates proper, but just enemy nations sailing in British waters, hacking the locals to bits. So we thought this would be a great chance to let a lot of the captains who've never been blooded in a port battle get in before. And we had sighted the French fleet logging off in front of port a few hours earlier, so we knew they'd have a full fleet in. They logged out sort of 20 seconds away from the port. I sort of understand why. You've got no bloody chance in getting into Pedro K, to be honest, because it is right next to the British capital. But anyway, logging in, boo. Anyway, so the Brits had 15 captains in who hadn't port battled before, and they probably had 7 or 8 ships that you wouldn't normally see in a, you know, they weren't strongholds. You could see that as soon as they took a shot, they lost half their sides. And the Eastern Alliance, it was like the Harlem Globetrotters. I think there was 4 port battle commanders in there. It was one of these things, you looked at the list of names, and I think of the 25 names, we instantly recognised 20 of them. One of the regular Brit commanders took command of the British pub team. I have to be honest, the Eastern Alliance kicked our asses. However, the little ships are a lot more forgiving, and I have to say, of the probably 20 of the 25 captains were really good at following orders. There was a few who weren't even on TeamSpeak who were arguably less good, and there was a couple of stars who held one circle on their own for a ridiculous amount of time, given the fact they were sailing splinters by the end of the battle. And I'm not sure what the death count was, but it would have been 3-1 in favour of the attackers. However, the port was held reasonably comfortably. The attackers were still 300 or 400 points behind the target when the bell rang. And it does go to show actually how tilted it is in favour of the defenders, and especially in the shallows, where you do have the speed to sort of run from circle to circle. And you are in ships that, if you're fully kitted with yellow mods, will sort of repair half of themselves if you've got your toolboxes and your carpenters and your emergency repair perk and so on and so forth. But anyway, it was a great fun run around. There was also some good biff outside the port, and I know a lot of the captains in there who hadn't fought in there before, or who hadn't fought in a new port battle, really enjoyed themselves. And holding off to some extent the Eastern Alliance A team, although it was mechanics more than skill that made it happen, proved to be great fun for everybody involved. And then lastly, the Americans had a little pop just around the coast at Costa de los Carrot, or whatever it's called, Carlos or something, up here on the other side of A's, against the Spanish. I haven't seen the reports of this yet, but they won. Now this might well be a night flip as far as the Spanish are concerned, and a core playing time as far as the Americans are concerned, but nonetheless The Americans making progress, and I do warn the Eastern Alliance. If you lose here, you lose the war. That has been all 3 wars have ended with the fall of the Gulf. So just be careful letting folks come round here, because it has no importance at all, but it has always been the harbinger of lose. So be aware of that. Where will we see the biffo next week? Well, I mean, Port-au-Prince and Les Cayes, these are, as was Castries, impregnable fortresses that can't be taken. So I'm saying that to tempt fate, lads. Come on, get in there. So Haiti's going to take a biffing. The Dutch just seem to like throwing timber at Caracas and Pampatar. We know the Swedes and the French are going to be playing south of the Windward Islands, and we know the Brits are going to have a crack at the ports ports around the Frenchy capital. I fully expect, in fact I think the port battles are already booked for the Spanish to come back and have a crack at the tip of Florida here. We'll get our normal sort of fracas happening up and down the coast where all the pirates love to live. And yeah, probably 30 port battles this week, boys. Well done, everybody. We're looking forward to the patch now. Let's hope this patch gets its move on. And just a reminder, I've managed to get 2 episodes done now where I'm discussing port tactics, one with an Eastern Alliance commander and one with a Western Alliance commander. You don't have to like the person, you don't have to like the outcome, you don't have to like the fact you were sunk in the battle. But it's very interesting listening to the tactics of some of the other captains and their approach to port battles, and indeed their approach to running the fleet. So I hope to do a couple more of those, maybe some with the same guys. Maybe some with some different guys. So if you are a fleet commander and you want to spend an hour or so with my good self and give some gibberings and impart your wisdom to the naval action community, just give us a PM, boys. And we come to the tally of splinters, sail and blood. And the Brits went nowhere. They just lost a lot of ships attacking. The Spanish took a shellacking and lost 14 ports. The Americans went bazookas and took 21 ports, 14 off the Spanish and 7 off the Danes. And everybody else pretty much held still. So the Americans, surprise risers. And of course they're going to get stronger and stronger with the big Dutch clan that joined them a couple of weeks ago, who are now sort of battle ready. And that's it for episode 50 of A Letter to the King. Give us a like, give us a subscribe. I'll see you on the ocean, and I will catch you.